Hello, this is Teresa McDowell, and this is a video about reporting suspected child abuse, the procedures and laws for educators. This is an important topic because we are charged with promoting all students' success, providing them a safe environment, advocating for these kids, and providing an environment that is conducive to student learning. Because all kids deserve a chance to learn, and we also know that if a child is abused or neglected, it's going to prevent them from learning, or at least learning to the degree that they are able to. So it'll prevent them from reaching their full potential. Educators have a legal obligation to report any suspected cases of abuse and neglect, so we need to be following the law. We have a legal context that we are operating under. We also have a moral obligation to provide for these kids. Kids who come to school happy and healthy, well-fed, well-nourished, they are more able to learn, like the picture in the first. The second picture, kids who come to school either abused or neglected come to school unable to learn. They're dejected, they are demotivated, and they are unable to learn, at least to the degree that they should be able to. The ISLLC standards that are applicable to reporting child abuse include Standard 2. An educational leader promotes the success of every student by advocating, nurturing, and sustaining a school culture and an instructional program that is conducive to student learning and staff professional growth. We are charged with nurturing and sustaining a culture of collaboration, trust, learning, and high expectations, and monitoring and evaluating the impact of these instructional programs. Students who are abused and neglected have placed their trust in us as their teachers and their educators, and we need to protect that. We are also supporting Standard 3 in the ISLLC standards by reporting child abuse and neglect. An education leader promotes the success of every student by ensuring management of the organization, the operation, and resources for a safe and efficient and effective learning environment. We are promoting and protecting the welfare and safety of these students by reporting this. A third standard for the ISLLC that we meet is Standard 5. An educational leader promotes the success of every student by acting with integrity and fairness and in an ethical manner. We are acting with integrity when we have a reasonable suspicion of child abuse and we make that report. It also ensures an accountability for every student's academic and social success, because we know that a student that is well fed and well cared for is going to be able to perform at a higher level. It also safeguards the value of democracy and equity. They do not take the reports at face value, but they are researched and evaluated. So the process of democracy is taken into consideration. These kids deserve a fair chance. They're not given a fair chance, a democratic chance, if they are held back by an abusive situation. Also consider the potential moral and legal consequences for decision making. If we know that something is happening, we have that moral and legal obligation to report it. Promote social justice and ensures that that individual student needs inform all aspects of schooling. The final ISLLC standard that we meet is Standard 6. An educational leader promotes the success of every student by understanding and responding to and influencing the political, social, economic, legal, and cultural context that that child lives in. We are to advocate for the children, their families, and their caregivers. We fulfill this obligation when we do report suspected cases of abuse. We protect that child, and we are advocates for them in the legal system. As I've said, teachers are mandatory reporters. All 50 states now have mandatory reporting laws for teachers. This changed in 1973 with the passage of the law. Before that, only 14 states had mandatory laws for teachers to report. After the passage of the law in 1973, then in 74, that number increased to 24. And is now up to all 50 states require teachers to be reporters. You might wonder why teachers are mandatory reporters, because we don't have any formal training in child abuse or medical care. We are the mandatory reporter, or a mandatory reporter, because we have this daily interaction with children and they are required by law to attend school. So that relationship between the child and the teacher is not subject to the parent, the whim or the desire of that parent. It is a mandatory requirement for them. And we have daily contact, so we would see changes in behavior. We are the only one that falls under this category because students are not required to visit a doctor or a dentist or a psychologist on a regular basis, but they are required to attend school. So we have this opportunity to observe the students in a consistent manner and to monitor their progress or their lack thereof. Definite things that all mandatory reporters should know is it does not protect you to report it to a counselor or an administrator. That does not fulfill the law. You are required to report it to your administrator, but you are also required by law to report this to the appropriate agency. In Kansas, the appropriate agency is the SRS service, and they do have a 24-hour child abuse hotline, 800-922-5330, which you can call. If you cannot reach them, you can call your law enforcement agency, and some court cases have upheld that that was good enough, but it has been taken to court for that. In Kansas, the child is considered a victim if they are under 18 years of age or over 16 and married. And in Kansas, the standard is a reason to suspect that the child has been harmed as a result of physical, mental, or emotional abuse, or neglect, or sexual abuse. Different states have different standards in reporting. To begin reporting, you can make a telephone call or a face-to-face report. You are to include the child's full name, their address, their birth date, their race, the address where they live, their full name, the address where the alleged incident occurred, who the perpetrator is, if you know that, and their full name and address, and any relationship to the child, any statements that the child has made, any history of behavior of this child, and a statement from you, personal statement of why you suspect this is abuse. You should know that an oral report does not protect you legally. You also need to follow that within 72 hours with a written report. This written report must be submitted to SRS where the child lives. It may be mailed, hand-delivered, or faxed, and you are also required to submit this written report to your administration. Each state also provides immunity from prosecution for a person reporting any child abuse suspicion in good faith. This includes both the criminal and civil liability. In addition to this, you are also provided with confidentiality. The perpetrator will not be told your identity. False reporting does not provide protection from prosecution if you are lacking a reasonable belief. And false reporting does wreak havoc with families, so you also need to be very careful that you do have a reasonable suspicion for reporting this child abuse. Even though teachers have the most contact, the most reliable contact with these children, they do generate the smallest percentage of reports, only 10% of the cases. If you fail to make a report, you can be charged with a Class B misdemeanor, and in Kansas, that means you can be confined for up to 6 months and a $1,000 fine. Case law is based on the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act of 1974. This is when they started mandating teachers to report, and it's based on physical injury, mental injury, negligent treatment, or mistreatment. They did provide the state funds for amending their state statutes to comply with this act, which is why throughout the years we now have up to 50 states mandating this. These protective laws are fairly recent, so there's just a smattering of cases. There's 6 to 7 cases, which is interesting. They are all reporting teacher abuse instead of home abuse, which we know that 90% of abuse does occur in the home. So this means that teachers are not reporting the suspected child abuse cases. One case that was interesting is Morris versus State in 1992. Morris was found guilty of a Class B misdemeanor. Her penalty was 120 days in prison, a $1,000 fine, and a year probation. In this case, the two paraprofessionals were abusing the child, and the teacher was aware of it and did not do anything, did not report it. More criminal cases is State versus Heard in 1986. The administrator was informed by the student of sexual assault by the school counselor. The counselor was subsequently convicted of this crime, but because the administrator did nothing on the initial contact, he was also convicted for failure to report. In State versus Grover, the administration had many parental phone reports of a teacher pinching or slapping their children. It was a continuous cycle, and the administration did not heed it until the abuse became severe. Because while they did report it at the end, because the abuse was continuous, they were also charged with the crime. In People versus Beardsley, the administration was taken to court, but they were found not guilty. They reported sexual contact between a 12 and 13-year-old student to the police, but they did not report it to the appropriate agency. Again, in Kansas, this would be SRS. And the Family Independent Agency took them to court because they did not get the initial report. In People versus Bernstein, there was a third-grade teacher who was sexually assaulting his children, and many parents had reported this to administration, but it was not reported to the appropriate authorities. When the teacher finally admitted to a paraprofessional that he was a pedophile, the administration was taken to court for failure to report. In Commonwealth versus Allen in Kentucky, this teacher was found criminally liable. She did make her report to administration, but did not make it to the appropriate authorities. The different categories of abuse are emotional, physical, neglect, and sexual. There are different categories different symptoms to watch for, and emotional is actually the root of all abuse. It includes terrorizing, rejecting, isolating, inappropriate control, ignoring, harassing, extreme inconsistency, coldness to the child, corrupting the child, belittling the child, or just being cruel to the child. The main symptom to look for is developmental delay, either physically, socially, emotionally, or academically. Other symptoms then, emotional outbursts, very withdrawn, depressed, either inappropriate infantile behavior or very inappropriate adult behavior. They're compensating for their lack of emotional connection with their parents or caregiver. Also then lack of attachment, overly compliant, or always watchful. Physical abuse, I would be very careful here. If a child is just falling down all the time and has bruises on their knees, that is not a questionable bruise. So take into account the stage of development the child's in. Neglect, persistent hunger, coming to school hungry, or persistent poor hygiene, never having any supervision, or excessive absences. Also, you need to be aware of fellow teachers abusing their rights as a teacher and using the child. This is one example of a teacher caught on a student's cell phone camera who was violently hitting, kicking, pulling, yanking on a child. And her behavior was witnessed by a fellow teacher and was not reported until later. So what do you think is going to happen? Reporting suspected child abuse is in the child's best interest. It does support the standards by helping us provide a learning environment that is conducive for the student, providing justice for this child. It is a moral and a legal consequence according to Standard 5. That's what we need to do. It promotes student success in a safe environment, Standard 3, and we are to be an advocate for children, Standard 6.